Okay, so today's project, we got a Kohler that has some carburetor issues. Now, to be clear, it was surging and I cleaned the carburetor and I was able to get rid of the surging. It does fine now, but inside it was all rusted from the gasoline has sat in the carburetor too long, and there was a lot of corrosion, and in some cases there was a little bit of pitting in it. So the customer called me, unrelated issue, and so I told him about the carburetor, how I got it to run, but it was pretty pitted. I said, next time you may want to consider, if you have problems with it, just go ahead and replace it. He says, replace it. I mean, I hardly got the sentence out before he said, just replace it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to replace this carburetor, and if there's time in this video, we may also do a tune-up. All right, so this is a Kohler engine, and so we're going to use a 10 millimeter here. There's two nuts. Now this one's kind of strange how this works. These two nuts don't hold the carburetor on. Only one of them does. This one's just it holds the air filter on. There's another nut inside once you get the air filter off that you got to take off. You'll see here in a minute. So we'll get that off. And then there's a 8 millimeter up here at the top. You got your vent hose, your crankcase gasket, or crankcase vent. Now this is that extra nut I was telling you about, or bolt I was telling you about. So that's an 8 millimeter also. This also holds the wire to your carburetor solenoid. The ground wire. While we're down here, we'll take the wire off the solenoid like that. Okay, so we're going to shut off the gas using a pair of vice grips. We'll just squeeze the hose, but we want to be careful that we don't squeeze it too hard and tear up the hose. And we're going to remove the clamp. Take a pair of needle nose, and the best way to do this is to get in between the hose and the carburetor and push it off. And we'll pull off the carburetor. So the solenoid is hitting the bottom down here. Now, that nut I was telling you about, see that? This goes into the back of it. Or the bolt, I should say. And we'll take that off. Then we'll take off the choke. I think the choke comes off. Yep, the choke comes off first. And then you got the throttle. But there's a plastic piece on that throttle. And we have to reuse that, I'm sure of it. I don't think the aftermarket comes, that's what we're using today, is an aftermarket. I don't think it comes with that plastic piece. I don't think any carburetor comes with that plastic piece. You have to buy those separately. And then the spring, and then we're going to try to get this plastic piece out. Here's our new carburetor, all shiny and new. Now we're going to take that plastic piece that we had, we're going to put it back into that hole. Now, there's a gap on that plastic piece right there at the bottom. So the carburetor, the throttle linkage has to go into that gap. Let's see if we can try to figure out how to get a picture of that so you can see it. Okay, you'll see that I got it in between the legs of that plastic piece. And then we gotta get this wire here, the spring. Now, just so you know what this spring does, this spring takes out the slop. There's a little bit of slop. That's one of the reasons that plastic is there, to remove that slop. So that's the only thing it does, is remove that slop in that throttle. Now we're going to put the choke on. I'm trying to do it so you can see it. So it goes like that into the back of this plastic piece, and then this goes into the carburetor. And this goes onto the bolt over here. I did forget to put the gasket on, so we're going to put that on. Put our ground wire back on, and the bolt that will hold the other side of the carburetor. Again, that's an 8mm. Okay, so now we're going to plug in the solenoid wire. This one's on a bottom instead of the side. I'm going to test that solenoid to make sure it works. All I got to do is turn the key on. We'll try to listen for it. Okay, I'm going to move the mic closer. Don't know if you heard that, but that's the sound of it if you did. Okay, so now I'm going to put the air filter housing back on. Okay, so I'm going to try to start it, see how it does. Well, I do think the changing the carburetor was the best bet. It does sound a little better than it did with the old carburetor. So apparently that corrosion or pitting or whatever must have gotten in emulsion tubes and caused a little bit of an issue, because it's a lot better now. I can idle it down without it surging. We need to do a service on. I've already heated it up, so when we start pouring the oil out of it, it should all come out. When you do that, it's important that you heat it up, not because it flows easier. I mean, that's an advantage, but because it stirs up all the stuff from the sump, and so you're getting all the dirt out as much as possible at least. Okay, so I've already changed the fuel filter on it because I had some carburetor issues on it, so we took care of that as well. So I won't be changing that, but that is part of the service. So there's a cap here that we just popped off. Then you're going to pull this, or excuse me, turn it. So the whole thing is loose, so we have to tighten this. Okay, this is pretty notorious for all lawnmowers. In this case, we got a 15/16. It's pretty big. We're going to come back here at the back. I'm trying to zoom in as best as I can for you, so you can see that I'm tightening the nut back here. I'll zoom in a little bit, but there's a nut back here that we got to tighten. Okay, so now we should be able to pull this out, or excuse me, turn it counterclockwise and pull it out, and oil start running out of it. Okay, while we're waiting on that, we'll go ahead and do the oil filter as well. Okay, got a little bit of oil. I'm going to put it on the ring here. Now, some will say that you should fill the oil filter up with oil before you put it on. Some say you shouldn't. I've done a lot of research on this. I'm not going to tell you one way or another, but just so you know, I didn't fill it. It's and I'm quite satisfied that I'm not going to hurt anything. It's my responsibility to take care of my customers, and I'm doing exactly that. Some of them you got to put in on sideways, and that even just makes a mess. Okay. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is change the air filter out. And then we have a foam piece that we're going to replace also. All right, took off the cover so we could remove the spark plug and change it. Okay, so we're going to gap it, the new one, 30 to 35. Okay, something you want to check on these Kohler Courages is the tightness of these two bolts specifically. They do come loose frequently. So, and the problem is when it comes loose, it hits this flywheel and then it cracks the entire assembly. So you just want to check to make sure they're still reasonably tight. Okay, finally, while you still have the top open, let's go ahead and get some of this grass clippings out, because this is air cooled. But specifically what you're worried about is mice nest. Okay, so we're done draining the oil, so we'll close this up, put the cap back on. Okay, it looks full. So I'm going to start it up so we can fill the oil filter. Okay, it's full. Okay, now we're going to grease the zerks. Okay, so I have already replaced the tubes, or put tubes in the tires, so the tires are already aired up, so I'm not going to go through that again, but you should check the tire pressure. And I just use the max tire pressure on the side of the tire. That's all I use. So in this one, 10 and 12, or 10 and 14. So if you'll click this up next box, it'll take you to another video that I've been working on something around here. So I hope this video helps you fix your equipment under the shade tree. Thanks for watching.